of building a strong economy is not the job of the central bank. It's not the job of politicians or statesmen only. It's the job of every Nigerian. What do you mean by this statement? Do you by any means make minimal the role of the Central Bank of Nigeria, who's in charge of monetary policy, as something that doesn't add any value to the economy at all?
No, perfectly not. If you understand that within the context of that presentation, what we're saying is that every hand needs to be on deck. Now, the central bank or whoever mans it must do its job. And then every other person, down to the family head, down to yourself, would have to put hands together to build a strong economy.
So I hear you correctly, and of course, as we speak today, the inflation rate of the country, or rather, the central bank is holding its monetary policy rate at 14%, and that has seen inflation drop consecutively over the next 9 months. Do you agree with the current monetary policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria, or you disagree with the policy? If you are president, would you follow or pursue such a contractionary monetary policy program?
Not exactly, Ayo. To really grow an economy, you need to grow the people. Now, whatever is being done to regulate or regiment the financial system may not be sustainable and would most unlikely be sustainable. You need to set policies that will be long-lasting, in fact, that will outlive any regime, and it will come back to growing the people, getting the economy driven absolutely and properly by demand and supply principles.
I hear you talk about the people. You make that case consistently, and I may remind you that we're talking about a country with 86% of its, with 6 million of its population living in extreme poverty. We're talking about a people who are poorly skilled, who have not gone through what you would call a high-rate educational system. What is it about these people, and what can you do with this group of Nigerians to make them drive the economic El Dorado that you're talking about?
Yes, foremost, you find that even those that have gone to school are not delivering on value. So in terms of economic deliverables, those that have gone to school may not be seen or said to be delivering more than those that hadn't gone to school. As a matter of fact, in certain cases, you find that those that hadn't gone to school are ultimately employing those that have gone to school. Now, the point, when we talk about the people, you find out that you really cannot grow a sustainable economy without deploying microeconomic dynamics, getting the people to own the economy. Now, let's put it this way. When budgets are done every year for as long as I can remember, you find that the budgeting is sharply divided between capital votes and recurrent votes. Now, recurrent vote goes to civil servants who are not delivering value. Capital votes ultimately gets finished by either corruption or capital flight by way of engaging multinationals to do things that ultimately the people can do. But if there is a targeted and purposeful and determined effort to grow the microeconomics, grow the people, get the people to start doing something at their own level, even at the level where you can say they are not very educated.
I mean, a lot of critics will say that you are guilty of living in the clouds when you talk about, such policies that you're talking about now, because every single administration, before they get into office, talk so much about the fact that our recurrent expenditures are taking all of the money and very little is left for capital growth and whatever, but very little has changed over time. What exactly are you proposing to alter dynamics to ensure that more monies are going to capital and very few to recurrent expenditure, bearing in mind that the greatest tragedy of the country is its inability to create employment or meaningful employment opportunities for its people?
Yeah, it's not even about more money going to capital. It's actually more money going to enterprise development. That is, getting money directly to the people via their own vehicles. such vehicles like religious institutions, such vehicles like cooperatives that will get money directly to people. We don't have any such right now.
So explain to me, I'm a bit confused how those monies are going to go through churches, through NGOs, through these kind of institutions that you're talking. Are you meaning to say that the federal government sits down and does the budget, orders the Minister of Finance to disburse monies directly to churches and to NGOs? Is that what you mean?
Remember that most of these institutions are registered. Of course, there will be very rigid registration formats.
Yes.
And you find that we have a way of comparing ourselves to the Asian tigers and to economies that have done well.
Yes.
Yeah, these economies have done well because they drew their economies via the people.
Yes.
They found systems that worked, that could make the people get the money and actually begin to deploy at their own levels. So yes, if we have to go through religious institutions that are properly registered to get money to the people, especially microcredits. Microcredits, the point is we all talk about microcredits, but does it really get to the people that will drive it? At the end of the day, you find a big organization declaring itself a micro organization, and because it has what it takes to get these things, and the people who should run the economy, they don't have registration formats, they don't have indemnity, they don't have guarantees.
So to be clear here, so that I don't get you wrong, you are proposing a huge microcrediting system and not a huge welfarist socialist system where monies are just handed down to the people. That's
not because it wouldn't serve much purpose. It's a huge microcredit system where people will still be accountable, they'll be held responsible.
But you see, critics talk about the fact that microcrediting, it just usually helps people in rural communities escape, the draconian hand of poverty, but really does not drive an economy to be competitive. What drives an economy to be competitive is the huge industrialization that a country is able to garner. How is microcrediting as a major policy of your proposal going to drive this huge industrialization that is going to lift the thousands of Nigerians out of poverty?
Okay, now huge industrialization by who right now? You find that most of the industrialization taking place right now are implemented and executed by multinationals. And there are very few multinationals that are indigenous, that are Nigerian, that are owned by Nigerians. There are very few, you can almost count them. So if you must achieve industrialization, you have to start with micro-industrialization. And that's what we are talking about. This huge microcredit we are talking about is to develop the micro-industries that will ultimately grow with time to become huge industrialization that can now spread out to other economies of the world as our own multinationals.
Okay, I mean, there's a report I'd like to share with you. The Manufacturers Association Nigeria, shared their report for 2017, where they said that the amount of inventory on sold goods was about 350 billion naira, and the argument was that the reason they have so much unsold goods because of the lack of purchasing power from Nigerians. And then we talk so much about micro-industrialization. How are you going to do that when the purchasing power of the average Nigerian seems to dwindle by the day?
Yes, you find out that it's all coming back to the same thing. You find when we get it right as a nation, we've gotten it right. Now, if we do this micro-industrialization, money will be in the hands of the people. Yes, there are some of it that will be lost by recklessness, reckless spending and other types of recklessness, but the point is that the money is not being lost to elsewhere, it's still being lost into the economy. So getting the people to own funds to spend, to be able to have purchasing power is a critical factor. And do we have that capacity? Yes, we do. All we need to do is to find out and find a way to curb the level of corruption. If we can, the money that can be saved and reharnessed from corruption alone, you find it will fund so much.
Christian Wogu, you're from the Southeast, and your people talk a whole lot about restructuring, wanting to decentralize power in the country. They want more autonomy at states and local government levels. They want to develop at their own pace. But what I hear consistently, it's about a huge federal government who is going to be driving a national funding project. a national microcrediting system that is going to be funding entrepreneurs around the country. And that in itself seems like it goes against the spirit of decentralization of power. So the question is, are you really for a decentralized economy in the country, or decentralization of power? Or you believe that a lot can still be achieved in this current structure, and when we get on our feet, we are still able to decentralize going forward?
Yeah, good, perfect. There are two things here. One is what is and what ought to be. Now, what ought to be could be ideal, and to a large extent is ideal, but it's going to take systems to get to where it ought to be. So within the context of what is, we can achieve a whole lot. But I think that decentralization is an argument that is sound and good. You must decentralize while you still maintain necessary controls and powers.
Let me take you up on the argument for decentralization. Do you think that regions and local governments, and let's use Ebonyi State for instance, that is one of the poorest states in the country, where is it going to get the requisite resources to build roads, hospitals, primary schools, secondary schools, and fund probably a state police? Where is it going to find all of that resources to do it?
Yeah, again, the argument on decentralization is a continuing argument. Somebody will say if you get 10 persons to tell you what decentralization means, restructuring means, they will probably give you 10 different answers. But the point is that, let's take a Ebonyi State like you've taken. You'll find that the greatest resource of any state in this country are its human resources. We've said this severally. Human resources and the land resources. And by the time you engage these two anywhere, you'll be able to produce enough for that state, and again to export out of that state. Maybe not out of the country for now. Export out of the state and get income into the state to do other things. So it still comes down to getting to resource and getting the manpower properly and thoroughly engaged.
You seem extremely passionate about developing people. May I ask, how in the world do you intend to develop the average Nigerian to be able to have the same amount of skill that his counterpart has in China or Indonesia or in Brazil? Because you must admit that we live in a highly competitive, globalized world where you're not just competing with people from your local government, but from people in the global community. So when you talk so much about developing people, what exactly are you going to do to ensure that the typical or the average Nigerian has the same capacity and capability like the man in India, Indonesia, or in Brazil does have?
Yeah, don't forget, Ayo, that most of the people doing great in most of these civilized nations are Nigerians. You would go to a hospital, you've paid so much, and you find that it's actually your fellow Nigerian that's going to be your physician. So Nigerians, they have the capacity to be as good as the best anywhere in the world. Now, essentially, we start by giving people the self-worth and ensuring that people have capacity to spend. And then you get into some level of partner, because there must be productivity, there must be production. And so there's going to be a counterpart between the public sector and the private sector. Right now, it must be admitted that the public sector earns salaries every month for giving no value. I mean, if they give value, we won't be selling off
Mr. Wogu, you're not placing your finger on the button, and I want you to hit the bullseye here. I want you to tell me exactly how, because you're talking about outcomes, I'm talking about process here. How are you going to develop these people so much so that they can hit that level of productivity that you're talking about?
Yeah, we start with the institutions. As the institutions are now, we must admit that what the universities, secondary schools, the primary schools, the best value they give the nation is people that would end up being employed. And of course, there are no industries to take them on. So we must recreate the curriculum, the system, to begin to develop people who will be productive, who will become the employers, who become business owners. We start from, because we must start from somewhere. And then by the time they've gone through that process, you find it has started, and they too, in a way, because they will start processes that must survive and succeed.
Sorry that I'm pressed for time and I'm pushing you fast, and I need to get this question off my chest. There's a national security problem in our country. The national security architecture seems to be broken. A lot of people have argued that it needs to be rejigged, it needs to be reformed. What exactly are your plans to lead a country that seems to be falling into crumbles in its security architecture? There are killings in Zamfara, in Kaduna, in Jos, in Nasarawa, and all of that. There are community clashes in Ebonyi and Calabar. How are you going to fix this huge security problem that seems to be swallowing up Nigerians?
Yes, we're going to work from what is, and basic thing about human nature is understanding where leadership stands at any point in time. Now, the first thing we'll get everybody to understand is that the value of one Nigerian life counts, and that it will be accounted for. Now, by the time you take a very unequivocal position that this is no-go area, a lot of adjustments will begin to take place, and you begin to fire. I mean, people that are asked to take responsibility and they can't account, you fire the person. And then somebody else who should do better comes in, and if he doesn't deliver, you fire. Somewhere along the line, the people that are in check, because it's a trustee system, you have entrusted people to do this work, and they are earning salaries every month and taking allowances, and if they're not delivering, they have to account for it.
Christian Wogu, fascinating book you have here, Stronger Economy and Dream for Our Country, and you make some very sound arguments here, and hopefully you can come back to the studio and we can take you up on some of all of your policy proposals. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I'm glad that you found time to be on the drill.
Thank you very much, Ayo, for the drill. I appreciate you a lot.
Thank you.